Today's friend is Mike Cruickshank. Mike, how you doing, man?
I'm happy you said my name right. That's awesome.
I've had a couple years of practice.
Yes. With minimal spitting on the microphone. That was awesome.
Yeah, not too much spitting.
All right, I'm very excited. Let's go. This microphone, these are so much better than the crummy microphones I use at home.
It's an upgrade.
You have to give me a list. I need to get a shopping list and then just called the J Frio list, and then just this is what you have to do.
Yeah, I'll get you that.
This is awesome.
But,
okay.
All right. Let's do this.
Yes.
Today's friend is Mike Cruickshank.
Yes.
Mike Cruickshank.
Yes.
Who is Mike Cruickshank?
I just had to do this the other day because I was filling out a Facebook dating profile and I couldn't do it. So I had a client of mine. I said to a client, I said, "Who am I?" And he said, "Well, you're a guy filled with lots of knowledge and facts. You love dogs. You do not need material things to make you happy. You're very self-sufficient. You can spend a lot of time by yourself. You don't have to have somebody around all the time. You love fitness. You love working out. You take good care of yourself." I'll have to go back and read the list because he was doing a way better job describing me than I do a better job describing me.
Wow.
Yeah. I say always on my videos, there's three things outside of workouts that define me: movies, dogs, and food. So the closest, I always say this thing, the closest I ever came, and I'll say this to you because you'll get this, the closest I ever came to being in touch with grace, with God, was when I was a kid. I was maybe 14 years old. I was in my parents' basement in Woodbridge, New Jersey, and I was eating an 8-pack of Roy Rogers fried chicken. I was a growing boy. And my dog, Brandon Duke of Tree Lamar, whose name was Brandy, but he had papers, he was sitting with me, and we were watching the 1984 version of the movie Dune. Have you ever seen the 1984?
No.
It is a beautiful disaster. It is like... It's like the Marilyn Monroe of movies. It's like gorgeous, but at the same time, it's just your heart goes out to it, right? Because it's just people can't handle that movie,
right?
Except for me and my Roy Rogers fried chicken and Brandon Duke of Tree Lamar. When I had those three things together, it was like I just felt like I was where I needed to be. And then years later, I had another moment with my own dogs. I was eating Snickers ice cream bars while watching Roger Moore in the James Bond movie Octopussy. And I was hanging out with my dogs, Frankie and Lily. And it's, again, those are the things that really make me happy.
I saw a recent video of yours where you held all those to a high standard and DiGiorno's didn't reach any of them.
So here's the deal with DiGiorno's. DiGiorno's knows what it's supposed to do. It's supposed to make teenagers happy. And drunk college kids. Because here's the deal. When you get to a certain point and let's say you're, how do I put this? And your reproductive importance is no longer high on the natural scale, certain other things begin to matter more to you, like taste, right? And flavor. Whereas if you're a teenager, you have other things on your mind, and we all have been there before, right?
That's a good point.
So therefore, DiGiorno's does what it has to do. It's hot, it's fresh, it's fast, and it's easy, and it tastes just good enough to make them happy.
You bring up an interesting point.
Yes.
Do you think that as we get older in life and as we start adulting more, to use a millennial term, that food becomes more important because there's so much worry and concern that you look for every bit of happiness. And when you're looking with a microscope for happiness, landing upon food might be a choice.
I think it's simple and easy. I was just listening to a story yesterday about a guy who was a California plum farmer. Don't ask me how I stepped into this, but he was a California plum farmer. He was like maybe in his 30s. He looked at his plum crop and he said, "My God, I'm counting all the plums and they're going to make me..." Back in the 70s, it was like 25 grand. You could buy a house for $8 grand. It was a lot of money.
Yeah.
And he started fantasizing about this new tractor he was going to get and this new plum machine he was going to get. And then all of a sudden, this cloud comes in and hail starts to form. And all the plums were destroyed in like 3 minutes. And then a wind blew the hail out, the cloud out. No more hail, beautiful sunny day, $25,000. Who knows how much the equivalent is nowadays of that. And everything was smashed within minutes. And he said the one thing he always knew is you could never count necessarily on tomorrow. The one thing you learn as an adult is all you really have right now is today. And while you always plan ahead for the future, you make as a child, as a kid, you make all these plans in your head, the way your life is going to turn out and the way everything is going to go. And then just something happens, good or bad, right? Something happens. And so I think food is very easy for a lot of people because it's a definite, right? Food is what food is. And it's something some people feel like they can always turn to when they don't have other things to turn to. Now, guys like you and I, we have our other things we can turn to help us kind of deal with the realities of life. but there was like a John Lennon quote that like something like, life is what happens when you have other plans. And I think that's what happens with food. You create these plans you think your life is going to be, and next thing you know, you're wearing shorts for a living, and you're sitting in front of Jay Frio doing a podcast, right? Like, at some point, I thought I was going to be the center fielder for the New York Yankees, but that didn't work out, right? Because I had no talent. So that was probably the first thing that slowed me down.
Right.
So I think that's where food, I think it's a lot of different things. Someone one time said to me, what are personal trainers going to do to solve the obesity crisis? And I remember listening to a social worker talk about this one. She said, you have to understand that so much of obesity is wrapped up in poverty. Right? This is the first time in human history where the most overweight people are the poorest people. Used to be back in the day, the poor people starved, right? William Howard Taft, President of the United States. Everyone thought he was really wealthy and successful because he was overweight. Like, how crazy is that?
It showed wealth.
Yes, it showed wealth.
Afford to eat.
You could eat, right? So it's like, so she's like, what you do for a living is great, and I'm glad you do it, and I'm glad you get out the message there. But you got to understand that like problems are not that simply solved. And you know it. Think of all the work you had to do just to get this microphone, this stand, and this computer, and this little red box. I don't even know what that does. And this awesome microphone, this earphone. Then you had to send a message out on Instagram and say, hey, anyone want to do a podcast? Serious inquiries only, right? And then you had to get my schedule and your schedule to match up. All of that just to get one podcast out. And then think about an entire career of podcasting and music. All is this wall of millions of bricks. And you just made one of them through all that work. It gets so much work to get so little done, but that's the reality of life. So what else are you going to do?
That's right.
Think about you make music, right?
Yeah.
How much goes into one song?
A lot.
A lot.
A lot.
And you're like a writer almost. Like writers say they torture themselves over one sentence.
Yeah.
Like you must torture yourself over a verse and just over and over and over.
The sounds more than the writing.
Yes.
I listen to it 50 times, 75 times. So listening to the same song, torturing myself.
Right.
In that way.
To get it right.
Yep.
And then at a certain point, it's never going to be right, but it's got to be done. Like I'm writing a fitness book right now, and it's called The 10% Solution. And I told myself, as of June 1st, there's no more rewrites. This thing is, the cover letter gets written the last 2 weeks of May, and then it goes out.
What's the premise, if you can say it?
Well, it's based on what I found is most successful. Since I'm not a dietitian, I can't tell people what to eat. And there's so many different medical conditions that are affected by what you eat. I have no right, nor do I handle the responsibility of telling people what to eat. But what I can say is I've been a personal trainer for over 23 years. And over time, what's the insurance company? We know a few things because we've seen a few things. I think it's Farmers Insurance, right?
We are farmers.
Right. And they have the commercial where like the car gets run off the road by a bear and then drives in, and next thing you know, there's an aquarium inside. And they're like, did that really happen? And the guy from Oz, who was a skinhead white supremacist guy, who won an Oscar. I can't remember his name.
I know who you're saying.
And he goes, because we've seen a couple things. Well, as a trainer, I've seen a couple things. And over the years, a majority of the people I see lose weight have certain things in common. And it's not what people think it is. People think, it must be low carb, low fiber, high fiber, protein this, protein that, vegan, vegetarianism. I've seen people fail and succeed on every single one of those diets. And that's why my hands get so twitchy when I hear someone say, this is the way you got to do it. Because that way they're telling you have to do it. I've seen in 23 years, 100 people fail on that way, and I've seen 100 people succeed in that way.
Are some ways better than others?
For the individual, right? So it's. I'll give you a perfect example. And it's getting off on a tangent, but years and years ago, I converted to Judaism. And someone said, well, why did you convert to Judaism, right? And because it fit me perfectly. I remember the first time I went into a Torah study group, and the rabbi was there, and he told this story, and it was about the first kiss in the Bible. And he said, when do you think it is? And someone said Adam and Eve. No. Someone said, well, is it, Sarah and Abraham? Yeah. Is it Rachel and Isaac? Is it, Jacob and, Leah? Or is it, well, probably not Leah because he really didn't love her. Is it Jacob and Rebecca? Yeah. Right? Rachel, sorry.
Right, yeah.
And so he goes through all these things, and everyone's like, no. And it was actually the first kiss is when he stole Esau's blessing. Remember when he put the goat leggings on himself?
Yep.
And he steals the blessing from
Isaac was kind of blind.
Yeah. And some people argue that he was in on it, but whatever. I'm not going to go into biblical conspiracies on the Jay Frio podcast. So he, that was the first kiss in the Bible. And he says, this is why I think they did that. And he gives his explanation of it. And then he looks right at me, this rabbi, and he goes, Rabbi Adam Feldman of blessed memory. And he says to me, he goes, what do you think? And I said to him, well, aren't you supposed to tell me what to think? And if I disagree with you, you're supposed to yell at me till I agree with you? And he's like, no, tell me what you think. And I had a totally different opinion from him. And then there were 5 other guys in the room who all had totally different other opinions of each other. And we argued and we disagreed and we judged each other's opinion. And I said, my whole life, I've been getting negative social feedback for being judgmental, argumentative, and complaining. And now all of a sudden I'm in a room full of people in which not only that's acceptable, but it's encouraged. So right, that religion worked best for me. I don't go around telling people what to believe because I know not everyone is as argumentative or as judgmental as I am. And I'm not saying that's the only tenets of the faith, but it worked for me, right? So what I find is it's more around the individual, the strategies around the individual. You meet someone who will go crazy about intermittent fasting. And there is no denying that intermittent fasting, if your viewers don't know what that is, there's a lot of methods of it. But basically you're taking longer periods of not eating, say like 16 hours, and then having condensed periods of eating like 8 hours. If you're the kind of person that doesn't eat breakfast, if you're the kind of person that works out later in the day, intermittent fasting is like the greatest thing ever. It's like me walking in there and being asked to argue, right?
Perfect match.
Right, perfect match.
Yeah.
And so what you find is dieting is really about strategies and systems that match the individual. And that's why you see 100 people are successful at one method, while 100 people are unsuccessful with the other method, right? It's a matter of matching it up to the person, even matching the strategies up to the person. Like, for example, I don't like to cook. I dislike every aspect of cooking. You remember Devin Peterson, right?
Yep.
So Devin Peterson has this great line where she says, I'm watching a cooking video and say, here's an easy, no hassle way to make your lunch. And then she says, they pull out the knife and the onion, and I'm like, all right, it's over. The second you start pulling a knife, you start to start chopping onions, it's all over at that point.
Yeah.
I agree with that. I can't do that.
Right.
So I had to find strategies that were specific to me that let me eat vegetables, like, I don't know, microwave in the bag vegetables. I pull it out of the freezer, I throw it in the microwave, I cut it open, and boom, I have vegetables.
You ever try drinking your vegetables? Your tuna?
So you watch the tuna as a beverage?
Yeah.
Okay, so no, I've never tried drinking.
For the viewers, go look up Push-Ups and Pizza, Mike's YouTube channel, where he talks about tuna being a beverage for context.
Yes. And so, no, I tried that once and putting all the stuff in the blender and the juicer and have it clean the juice. It was just too much. And you might say, dude, that's pathetic. That's insane. But you put me in a room with 100 people and I'm more neurotic than 97 of them, right? So it's like, that's just not going to work for me, but I still don't want to be overweight. So what do? Well, I've got to find a diet that allows me to get vegetables, but that allows me to work within who I am as a person. You know what? Maybe one day I'll evolve into a guy who can chop. But for right now, I'm not a chopper and I'm not a cleaner.
So you talk about this in your videos where you're so comfortable in your skin and you said, I am what I am.
Yes.
Right?
Yeah, Popeye. Yeah.
I am what I am.
Yes.
But do you ever struggle with wanting to become something different? How do you deal with the struggle of wanting to become something different and maybe better, whatever that means?
Except I'm a human being,
and
number
accepting
one.
Yourself.
Yeah, you're a human being, number one. So you're always going to have some form of envy in your heart, whether people want to accept that or not. The biggest mistake is not believing that's true of you. Every horrible thing that ever happened started with someone not admitting that they may be doing it for the wrong purposes, right? Maybe more glorification for themselves than anything else. So I would say is, yeah, of course I do. Look, the other day there was this young kid, real stud, and he was benching really heavy in the gym. And I was like, man, I'd love to bench press again. Then there was this other young kid, he's squatting real heavy with a barbell. And I'm like, yeah, I'd love to squat again. And then I remember like, oh yeah, I got arthritis in my right hip. Oh yeah, I got arthritis in my right shoulder. Oh yeah, I'm 46 years old. Yes, there are exercises I can do that don't irritate those muscle groups or those joints, but those aren't it. So sometimes it's about the past, sometimes it's about the future. That happens all the time. Like, for example, the Winter Olympics are just on. I'll tell you an example this morning. I was watching the combine, was all in the gym, right? So I'm training people and the images are going above my head. And yesterday the linemen were on and they were like, maybe the fastest guy was like a 4.7 and the average guy was like 4.9, 5.1 for the 40-yard dash. And then all of a sudden this morning, the skill position guys were on. And guys are running 4.25s, 4.33s. And you just see it in the screen above you how much faster they are. And I'm thinking to myself, what if one day I was like the skill position guy, I could run the 4.3. I run a 5.240 at my fastest.
That's not bad.
Yeah, but I don't have the fast twitch fibers for that.
Right.
I'll give you a perfect example of that when I was watching that James Bond movie with Frankie and Lily. And there's a scene where Roger Moore is sneaking through the Kamala Khan's palace, right? And he's got the Walther PPK and he's like sneaking through, right? And there's like spies with machine guns everywhere. And he's really cool and he's going to find the secrets. And I'm like, yeah, I can't do that. I know who I am. I'm too neurotic. I would look around and go like, oh, that guy saw me. Did that guy see me? Did he see me? I don't know if he saw me.
Overthinking everything.
Right. So I think what happens is the more you come to accept yourself, it's not that you don't have those moments. That's what movies are all about, right? They allow us to go outside ourselves for a couple of minutes.
Right.
But then when you leave the movie theater, that's got to stop, right? And so what happens is the more in touch you are with who you are and your limitations and strengths, I think that helps. I think that helps with dieting especially because you start to say, you know what? I'm not Emeril Lagasse. I don't take joy and pleasure. And there's a guy at our gym who used to work for Emeril Lagasse. Wow. And he says the guy is absolutely, when he cooks, he's in touch with God, right? That's as close as he gets to whatever is greater than him. And so I don't have that with cooking. I can't stand it, right? So I think that's a big part of it.
Is it not to get religious or philosophical, but is it what
this
gifts?
Is the Jay Frio podcast. This is what you do different than other people. It's not just here's my new album, right? You go a little deeper.
We go deeper here.
That's part of who you are, right? That's who you are as a person. You're a guy who is not just on the surface. So okay, maybe that might be too intense for some people. It's not intense for me. That's why I'm in this room with you. So
that's
please,
right.
Go ahead.
Thanks for being here.
Yeah.
So I want to bring it to, you can say whatever God gave you gifts.
Yes.
So whatever gifts God gave you, you have to work with. He didn't give you some gifts. He gave you some gifts I'm a great rapper. I can make beats, but singing, I wasn't necessarily blessed with singing.
Right.
I have a deep, raspy voice.
Right.
I'm not angelic.
Right.
You know what I mean? I'm not Stevie Wonder. I'm not Bruno Mars.
Right.
You know? So I don't have that. So I accept my limitation in singing.
You could take the most atheist person in the world. I mean, in the middle of a foxhole, bombs are going off around on them, and they're still denying the existence of God, right? You can be and you're still going to admit that on some cellular level, some people are built with different gifts than others.
Right.
Physically, it's the most, you can't deny it physically. I'll give you an example. There's a book called Atomic Habits.
You heard of it?
You've read it? Okay.
I haven't read it.
So they talk about Michael Phelps, who everyone knows who Michael Phelps is. And they make an example of him versus the world. I think he's like the world 5,000 meter champion in running. The 5,000 meter runner is 5'9". Michael Phelps is 6'4". They wear the same inseam on their pants. Their legs are both 30 inches.
30?
30.
Wow.
So can you imagine what their bodies look like when a 6'4" guy has the same length leg as a guy who's 5'9"? Why one guy became a world-class runner? Because of his 5'9" inches, 30 of that's in his leg, and why the other guy became a great swimmer because of his 6'4" inches, only 30 inches of that in the leg because the legs are drag. He needs that long torso, right, to create more distance in the pool. So that's a perfect example of even bodies are built differently. Look at calves. You see guys all the time with big calves, and then they try and jump. They can't go anywhere.
That's right.
Because they've got this little Achilles tendon where most of the energy is generated to jump high.
Or you could be Joe Smeck and have amazing calves and jump amazingly at the same time.
Right, but Joe Smeck is eventually going to turn into a bicep. I mean, we all understand. We love Joe Smeck, but the guy's getting so muscular these days, he's literally just going to become one giant piece of vascularity.
I'm going to call him muscle, not Joe. He's muscle.
That's eventually where he's going to end up.
One muscle.
So it's all blessing in a disguise.
You're right.
But yeah, I mean, people's psychologies are different. I knew at that moment I would be way too neurotic to be a secret agent. So while that movie let me escape out of myself for a couple seconds, at a certain point, you have to kind of come back and say, all right, where am I now? What am I going to do with what I have right now? And that's nowhere more apparent than diet and exercise, right? It's so in front of you. It's like, all right, what am I capable of doing now? What can I do a little bit more and a little bit more and a little bit more? And with the 10% solution, what I found was when people lost about 10% of their body weight, most of what the average normal person's goals were accomplished. They don't have six-pack abs. They aren't all veiny and vascular, right? And that's about Joe. Joe has never been a guy who's been in that middle ground, right? Everything Joe does, whether he wants to be a manager in fitness, whether he runs his own gym, how he trains his body, everything about Joe, to a certain extent, is always at that next level. But that's the way Joe is wired, right? Like I get in one place and I stay there. He's not like that, right? So I'm actually, sometimes I get angry, and don't tell Joe this. No one tell Joe this. But sometimes I get a little,
Joe?
Right, Joe, turn it off right now.
Off.
Sometimes I get a little mad, right? Because I'm like, you get jealous of people. Like, what's up with this guy? He goes out and does his own gym. He does this, he does that.
Yep.
But the reality is that's who he is, and that's what he does. And it's like, I got me. And I'm going to do the best version of what I can with me. It's what I've learned the hard way. Now, this isn't like flat. Remember, I work in a gym for a living. So I'm not giving anyone lectures because that's another big thing of the 10% solution is when people say to me, oh, well, the worst thing anyone can ever say to me is you don't enjoy food, that you see food as fuel and not enjoyment. And that is the biggest piece of guard. No, I have a video coming out tomorrow where I show I eat Snickers bars. Wow. I sniff them.
Wow.
I sniff Snickers bars like a cigar aficionado.
You want to talk about intensity? I don't know if I can handle that.
So I love food more than you can imagine. And you know what? It's not like I aced the MCATs or the LSATs and gave up law school and medical school to go work in the gym. But what I do have, so I don't have this ironclad discipline. I don't have this inhuman athletic ability to turn my food button off. But I do have systems in place. And I have an organization based around my food where I don't think about it that much, right? I have my breakfast, 1 or 2 breakfasts, that's all I eat, right? I have my protein shake in the middle of the afternoon. Then I have 1 of 3 different lunches I eat. Then I have another protein shake. Then I have another 1 of 3 different dinners I eat. And that's part of the 10% solution is you understand that you lose about 10% of your weight and then stay there. The art of maintenance. So many people can lose weight, but they're really bad at the nebulous concept of maintenance. So the idea was lose 10%, stay there for 1 to 4 weeks. There's certain physiological benefits for that, but mostly it's psychological. You learn the habits of being able to eat without overeating. And then if you feel like you need to lose more weight, if your doctor feels like you need to lose more weight, go right back at it again. Again, I can't recommend these things as a nutritionist. I'm just telling you that when I've observed people over all these years, I've seen that people shotgun 100 pounds, 150 pounds off. But more often than not, those people tend to bounce back and gain that weight all back. Whereas I've seen people that get a certain amount of weight off, stabilize, and then use that. I'll give you an example. When people climb Mount Everest, they don't go from foot 0 to foot 29,000.
No.
Right? There's certain base camps they go to allow themselves to acclimate.
That's right.
That's kind of what dieting is for a majority of the people. Now, I'm trying to say this right here. I'm not trying to start a religion.
Right.
If you find that you lose pound 0 to pound 100, and that's the way your brain works, and you're that Joe Smeck, God, this guy's getting so much free press out of this.
That's right.
You're that Joe Smeck bang, 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 bang guy. There's a fighter, actually, in the UFC, who has a tattoo that says 0 to 99. And when they asked him about it, he was a wrestler, I think he was from Edinburgh. They asked him, he said, that's my personality. I'm either 0 or 99.
Why didn't you say 100?
It might be 100. I don't know. I don't stare at men's chests that long. So whatever it was like a 0 to 100 or 0 to 99.
Yeah, and what was his answer?
He said, basically, that's my personality. I'm either 0 or I'm 99.
I'm like that.
Right.
Like
so
that.
then you got to accept that and work with it. If you try to get all subtle, it's not going to work.
I take a cold shower in the morning and a burning hot shower at night.
Boom,
I don't do lukewarm.
But that's the Jay Frio I know.
Yeah.
I give an example. A book I just read by this guy, Victor Davis Hanson. It's about these 5 generals throughout history. They're all the same. They all saved a war effort that was about to completely blow up in their country's faces. And every single one of them was ostracized or shut out after the war was over because the very aspects of their personality that made them these great generals in these specific situations made them an absolute failure at peacetime and made them an absolute failure in certain traditional forms of war. Like you'd never guess the one guy, Sherman, who was very popular during the Civil War. He was an absolute failure in everything he did prior to this one campaign of the Civil War. And then his style of battle worked really, really well for this one aspect. And then all of a sudden, after the war was over, it was kind of like, what are you going to do with this guy?
So maybe try to find where your strengths work in life and in the world?
Absolutely. I went to college with a guy, and he's a real personable guy. Everyone loved his name because everyone loved Eddie. But Eddie would always say he was never a great engineer. But Eddie could talk to the executives, and he worked in the military, so he could talk to admirals in general. He could talk to anybody. But then when you went to the engineers, the guys who actually designed these missiles that flew around the world, you'd be like, hey, say the guy's name was Jay. Hey, Jay, could you describe to Admiral, I'm going to make a name, Admiral Nimitz, right? It's a famous name. Could you describe the way the missile works? And the guy would be like, I have to, and that's the way the guy would talk. He'd be like, well, can you explain how the missile works relative to the air carrier? He goes, and the guy would do that. He didn't have that, but he had the genius scientific brain, right? So that's
why you put teams together and duos together.
Right.
Can't do everything yourself sometimes.
Absolutely. And that's why there's rappers. That's why there's opera singers. That's why there's poets. That's why there's guys who play the bass.
Yeah.
There's bass players and there's guitar
players. That's Bobby B, man.
Yeah. But Bobby's a bass. You know Bobby.
Yeah.
You got Bobby Bungor, right?
Yeah.
Bobby's a bass guy. And he's a good bass guy.
He's a good bass guy.
Right. But you got to understand that. And I think that's something I struggled my whole life to kind of understand. And now I've kind of settled in where I'm at. Is, I'm not a business guy, and I'm not. Look, you can't put me in a nightclub. First of all, I'm not pay $12 for a beer. Number one, but number two, it's an assault on me. I started I don't get the glow sticks out. I go like this.
Yeah, you hide from it. Yeah.
Right. So that doesn't work for me.
No.
But going to walk a dog for 2 hours straight,
that's right.
That works for me. Like
that lights you up.
Yeah, I went to the Hamilton Library. I'm surrounded by all these books, and I just smell the books, and it's like this is must be what people who go to
raves.
Raves must feel like, right?
Yeah.
So you waste so much of your life trying to be something you're not.
Right.
Right. Whereas once and that's the cool thing about being old. Stuff doesn't work that well anymore on you.
Right.
But you start to accept who you are, and you kind of become okay.
What advice do you have for people that are at raves hiding? But they can't not go to raves. Everyone's going to raves. Their friends are going to raves. Their girlfriends are going to raves. They need to go to raves, but they hate raves.
So the one thing I've learned is that people who are most often ready to give advice to other people are trying to run from something in their own life. So let me focus on you and not focus on myself. Let me tell you about all the things that are wrong with you and not wrong with yourself. Let me try to fix these big global problems when I can't even wash my own dishes and put them away,
Or like in the Bible, you're trying to fix the splinter in your eye when I have a log in mine.
Right, don't fix the cinder in a man's eye when he's got a board in his own, right? I mean, that's a perfect example, right?
Yeah.
So I find a lot of times that if I find someone who's in that situation, the only thing I can do is put my message out there and let them make that decision for themselves. Because here's the deal. Someone once said something I thought was really dumb. I said, Shank, if you could go back in time and say anything to yourself, what would it be? Like, go back 20 years. I'm like, I wouldn't say anything to me because I'd look at me in 20 years and say, loser, get out of here. I don't need to listen to you. I know what I'm doing.
Yeah.
I wouldn't listen to me. So it's like a wasted amount of breath. I mean, I would say invest in Google and be like, what's Google? Invest in Yahoo. What does Yahoo? I like life way better with these earphones on. No wonder the musicians wear these. Yeah, no wonder musicians wear these. Like, I never remember when I was a kid and they had that We Are the World and they all had the earphones on when they were singing. We
are the world.
Yeah, now I know why they were doing this.
We are the world.
This is a whole other world I'm living in right now.
You're living in your head.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm always in my head. So I'll give you a perfect example. I have a client of mine who's a therapist. And she said something once. I was like, because I haven't been able to sleep since I was 5. My brain just runs 1,000,000 miles an hour. And she said to me,
wait, how are you alive if you haven't slept since 5?
I get like an hour or two a night and then I pass out and then like all of a sudden I'll sleep for like 20 hours straight and then I'll be awake for a bunch of hours.
Does this relate to you at all? My dad has pretty good sleep habits, but he takes naps at 7 or 8 or 9.
That's usually me.
And then he'll wake up and they'll get like 4.
I'm a world-class napper.
Okay.
But one of the things she said to me is, why are you laying in bed doing nothing? Or lying in bed, because she's from Princeton, so she has good grammar. Lying. Says, why are you lying? Yeah, you lay things down.
Lay
you
a
lie
rug?
down. Yeah, you lie down.
You lie down.
Right. So why are you lying in bed? Why don't you get up and do something productive? Because you're just lying there inside your head. Thoughts are bouncing around 1,000 miles an hour. Get stuff done. So I started to-do lists, and I started looking at, I was like, what on this list can I get done instead of sitting here thinking up scenarios and problems? It's like the Mark Twain line. I've had all these tragedies in my life, some of which have actually happened.
Yeah.
Right? So instead of doing that, go do something productive. So if someone who's at that rave, who really genuinely doesn't belong there. We know that like something like a third of the population is genuinely introverted.
Right.
They are not energized by external stimulus.
They're actually drained.
Right. Like, so I'll probably go home, eat something, and then lie down. But it's funny. On the ride over here, one of the things I wrote in my man diary the other day was...
What's a man diary?
I keep a man diary. So I do this on email. So what I do is I send an email to myself every day. And I have a master list on my computer. It's got my top 10 things I want to cover in my diary and then my top 10 goals for this year. And there's set things like number 1 is good things are supposed to happen to me. And then I write, why is that true? Why are good things supposed to happen to me? Now, recently I've co-opted this and I've come up with some make-believe nightmare scenario I've come up with in my head, and I point all the reasons out why that's nonsense.
Nice.
Right? So, and then the second thing...
Reverse psychology.
Yeah, and the second thing is my 3 primary goals for the year, the 3 things I really want to focus on. The third thing is how are you going to handle your to-do list today? The 4th thing is that's 7. What is number 4? Number 3 is the list. I can't remember off the top of my head. Yeah. One of the numbers is, what do you have today to appreciate? Number 5 or something like that is, how are you going to conquer fear-based procrastination? Because that's one of the things I have is because you're neurotic, you're very fearful. So all of a sudden you procrastinate things. You're like, oh, I'm tired, I'm this, I'm that. You're actually not. You're using that as an excuse to mask up your fear.
Yeah.
So I have this list I keep every day. and I update it every day. Like sometimes I'm too exhausted to do the diary. And I realize why. Because I'm afraid what might come out in that diary.
Interesting.
I might come out with something that says, you know what, you're really not too tired to do this. Like one of the ones is number 10 is, what are your strengths? What are your weaknesses? How are you going to emphasize the strengths today? How are you going to minimize the weaknesses? And what she was Tracy saying is, look, you have this strength. You have a very active mind. You have this weakness. You have a very active mind. You just can't put your head. One of my clients, Louis, always says, you don't have a very clear head. You don't just lie down and go to sleep. So how are you going to use that to your advantage?
Right.
And for years, I would just lay in bed and just twitch. But now I know
you would think all through it.
Yeah, and get up and do something. Because the thinking is really the fear. The doing is you actually, and that me coming here today, I was all energetic, right? But the same energy that drives that fear is what drives me to sit in here and talk to you on a microphone and not go,
gift and a curse.
Yeah, it's all
we
the
get
same
the blessing
thing.
on camera, but off camera.
And and I have clients do that to me all the time. Like, oh, well, I'm not very athletic. I'm like, yeah, but you just split atoms. Like, they don't. Like, you literally just. One of the people who told me he's not very athletic. He literally created the sun inside a container, right? So once they learn to contain that sun, they basically have a limitless source of energy. He's like a plasma physics kind of person. But he's sitting here complaining that he can't do a jumping jack. I'm like, dude, but you just recreated the sun.
Wow.
Right? So everyone's got gifts. So here's what we do.
Yeah.
Maybe you don't do a jumping jack, but maybe you take your 55-pound lat pull down. Let's get to 60. And because you know why? You can do everything you need in your life with an 85-pound lat pull down. You don't need to be able to deadlift 400 pounds. You just got to get a little stronger so you can get around your life better and then do what your blessings are. A perfect example is a guy, you ever Ed Cohen?
Yes.
Okay, so can you tell the audience who Ed Cohen is?
I've only heard of him.
All right, do you know what his sport was?
What's the context?
Powerlifting.
Yeah, I don't know.
So he's what I say is
in.
He's the world's greatest powerlifter.
Got it.
And there's a couple of things I know about Ed Cohen, and I'm going to get this. First of all, Ed Cohen's a legend.
Okay.
So all the stories about him are going to be insane, right? It's always going to be like something happened here and something happened there, and it's a little bit off from the truth, right? But allegedly, when Ed Cohen was like 13, 14 years old, he had never really done serious weightlifting before. Maybe did some of those sand-filled barbells in his garage. He was 13, 14 years old, weighed 130 pounds. Okay. He walked into a gym for the first time, saw a 400-pound barbell on the ground, and picked it up. Never probably even handled an Olympic weightlifting bar, which we all know is thicker than a standard bar.
Is that confirmed?
Yeah. He's told the story that he was like 14 or 15 when it happened. Some people say it was 350. Some people say it was 450.
Right. It was a lot.
I think it's at the point now where he sits back and laughs because he knows that he's gifted, and he loves the fact that, I don't know, I shouldn't put that in his head, but I think it's kind of cool when you realize that like you're kind of a legend that walks.
Yeah.
Right? And so what's funny was he picked the barbell up. So he started out at a triple bodyweight deadlift, right? That's a gift. Now, what he did with that gift was through a lot of training and all other types of stuff. He turned that 130-pound body into a 215-pound one that went from a 400-pound deadlift to a 901-pound deadlift. That took place probably over a decade.
Long time.
Right? But he started out higher, he ended higher, and he probably progressed faster because of the gifts he was given. It's interesting. He's only about like 5'4", 5'6". But he's not.
So less of a way to lift a bar.
Right. And he's got these long ape-like arms that almost reach down to his kneecaps.
Interesting.
He's had several videos of this, but there's one video where he goes up to a guy who's 6'7", weighs about 330 pounds. Big dude, right?
Big dude.
They have this, Cohen's like maybe 5'4", 5'5", I can't remember. He's about maybe 215. They have the same size hands.
Wow.
Let that sink in for a second. The guy is almost over a foot and a half taller than he is. Almost, a foot and 3 inches.
Yep.
He's a foot and 3 inches and outweighs him by over like 140 pounds, 120 pounds, whatever. And they have the same size hands, right? So it just gives you an idea of how certain people are built for certain things, but that doesn't mean you can't improve, you can't get better.
Right.
So it's the same thing I tell my clients that all the time. Look, this is where you're at. You have these gifts. Okay, maybe you're not the greatest maybe you're not Ed. No one's Ed Cohen. There's never been an Ed Cohen before,
right.
And there's never gonna be another one ever again.
There's one,
right?
Snowflake,
right? But it's funny when you watch Ed Cohen. He got into martial arts recently, and he wanted to learn a lot about what's called Scott. You remember Scotty D? Scott Donaldson.
Of course.
Scott does this kind of like combatives type of realistic martial arts type of training, and he recently got into that. And he said one of the one of the lessons they were doing was how to defend yourself from a knife. And he said from being like the world's greatest powerlifter, he can't move.
Too stiff?
Right. He's too, because what made him such a great powerlifter was, and I think I've heard him tell the stories, and he was a kid, he had certain motor issues. So he had to wear special glasses so he wouldn't fall over. So what better sport for a person who's really, really strong but can't move around very much than powerlifting?
Deadlifts and squats.
It's the greatest thing in we could hold a powerlifting contest in this space that we're doing this podcast.
In a 6-foot space, yeah.
And that's why when I went to high school, most of the guys who got into weightlifting and powerlifting were the guys who couldn't play football, couldn't play soccer, and weren't built well for cross country. So what they do, they went in the weight room. They couldn't play basketball, they couldn't wrestle, right?
I just had this conversation with someone who loves you, who's very excited to watch
Who's
this.
that?
Mendez.
Oh, Big Daddy Mendez.
Yeah.
Okay,
And
yeah.
Mendez,
Mr. Chest. Yes.
Mr. Chest, nice legs.
This is a guy, talking about genetics. He has the chest of a modern Thanksgiving turkey, right? Like the old Thanksgiving turkeys. This is
Big ones.
That's where I go.
Big
the old turkeys had more dark meat than white meat. Then Americans got all obsessed with white meat, and they made these turkeys that were total mutants that had these little legs and they would break in half, right? With these that's Mendez. He has this massive chest and he doesn't even work it because he looked completely asymmetrical.
Yeah.
Again,
huge chest.
Yeah, no one would ever look at Christian and say, "Oh, there's Ed Cohen Part 2."
Right.
Or Eduardo, right? Cohen, because he's Spanish.
Yeah.
But they would say, like, look, that guy's got but they never know. He's never done a bench press like in 5 years.
He naturally,
right,
nice
right, because that's his right, and
genetically gifted.
And you know what that human being will do? He'll do nothing but lament about it because he has to work so hard to make everything else grow. And if God forbid he does a bench press, he can't fit into his shirts anymore. So that's what people are.
That's right.
We're never happy.
No, we're not. But that's the thing. We was talking about sports, and he never really did sports. But what I was explaining to him, and I was like, come on, even Airbud was hitting threes. Because I wanted to come and play hoops. But he didn't need sports.
Yes.
He got involved in the gym.
Yes.
And the gym is a place you don't have to be athletic to pick up a barbell.
No.
You don't need to be athletic.
Right, that's why people don't wear helmets on the stationary bike. Because it's not going anywhere, right? I mean, some people might. I don't know. Some people, that 1-2 guy more neurotic than I am, he might be the guy wearing the helmet on the stationary bike.
What if it comes unhinged?
That you never know, right?
You never know.
Look out.
Jacob's ladder, you might need one. Right?
So, right, that was always the huge thing about powerlifting and distance running. If you weren't built for powerlifting, you could distance running. Why? Because you just went in this direction. But you watch Grease, right?
Yeah, Grease Lightning.
He couldn't do any sports other than running. Sid Caesar, long distance running, right? Because that's the one sport he could do.
That's right.
Well, that's what's the great things about the weight room. And I said to my clients all the time, look, there's a skill in this, right? Especially if you're trying to like feel your lats activate on a lat pull down. It may take years for some people. But the cool thing about the weight room is, and weightlifting in general is, unless you're doing Olympic weightlifting or some type of strongman competition, it's not a super high level skill like learning to play tennis or soccer or baseball or wrestle. So anyone can really do it. And that's the thing is, anyone can get better. Anyone can get stronger.
That's right.
Not everyone will wind up like Ed Cohen, but even the best powerlifters aren't like Ed Cohen.
But isn't it funny that people love it? I had Brandon Swanner on for episode 1.
Right.
And Brandon said, I said, what's your favorite exercise? He said, bent over dumbbell rows. I love picking things up and putting them down.
Yeah, well, but you're talking about Brandon now. You're talking about a guy who's also a different mindset.
Yeah.
Right? So Brandon, by his nature, is a long, thin guy, right?
Yeah.
And at one point, he was carrying, if he was me, he would look like a bowling ball of muscle, right? He basically he's just tall, right? So the same amount of muscle on me stretches out on him. But I remember one time when I first started working at this gym we had worked at together, and he was huge. And I remember he had to eat carbs out of a bucket because he had to eat so much food every day to maintain his weight. People were like, well, why don't you eat pasta? It's because he had to eat 7,000 calories of it a day.
Yeah.
So he had this bucket of like carbs that he used to take.
Carb bucket.
Right, the carb bucket.
Yeah.
And so it's a psychology. Some people are driven more, right? So he wasn't a guy that was built like me where he's short and stubby, or like Schmeck who's really short and stubby. Sorry, Joe. But he had that mental drive to do the things that most people normally wouldn't do. I met a guy once when I used to work in a gym, and he wanted to get jacked. He wanted to be like Joe. But he was like a long, thin guy.
Like me.
Yeah, but he wasn't as tall as you. He was just like a 5'9". You're what, over 6 foot?
Yeah, like 6'2".
Yeah. So he was like 5'9" and thin. And he's like, all right, write me a diet. I'll do whatever it takes. Like what Brandon did, right? I'll do whatever it takes. And I wrote him this down, like, look, I'm not a dietitian, but here's a diet. And it was like, his current body weight times 20. So it was only like 3,300 calories. Not a lot of food. That was like Brandon's breakfast.
Yeah.
And the next day I saw him and he was eating wings from McCaffrey's. And I said, dude, that's not on your diet. He goes, yeah, I just woke up 10 minutes ago. Like, you know what I mean? So what did he do? He stayed thin and he got into Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, and now he's got like a purple or brown belt in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu.
So his goal wasn't his strength.
No.
He wasn't playing to his strength.
No, he's not built like that.
Yeah.
And if you look at Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, it was invented by a guy who was too sick and weak to do judo. Right? So Helio Gracie, his father, I don't think it was Kimura, because that was the guy he actually fought. It might have been Maeda or one of those guys. He came over with a large group of Japanese immigrants to Brazil, and he taught the grandfather taught the Gracie sons judo, but Helio wasn't strong enough to do it. So he created his own style of judo, basically Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, that worked around his body and the fact that he was a sickly, weaker, smaller guy at one time in his life. And so this guy was trying to be a big, bulky guy, but it wasn't necessarily he had the physiology for it. Because a guy like Brandon's a tall, lean guy, but he had the psychology for it.
He did.
This guy didn't have the psychology for it, so what did he do? He got into Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, and now he's attained a level of Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, number one, that 99% of the people who go in the art don't ever get to. It's some weird washout rate once people turn blue belt.
Right.
And the other thing is he's got a skill set that no matter how much you bench press, it's not going to matter when he's making you go to sleep.
That's right.
You know, so when he's cutting off your carotid,
it's not going to matter that you could deadlift 315.
I can deadlift
when he's got you in a rear naked.
Yeah.
But do you think everyone has the drive? They just have to find what pulls it out of them?
I think everyone has something they can't shut up about, right? I think everyone has that one thing that when you hit that button, God help me for telling you, Larry King. Do you remember Larry King?
I do, yeah.
Larry King wrote a book years ago, and he said they asked him what the worst interview he ever did, and it was with some World War II fighter pilot. And he sat there live, like on CNN, trying to, Larry King. When Larry King can't get something, it's like, I don't know. It's like Sunkist not getting juice out of an orange. Like, how does that even happen? And so
it's like the Kool-Aid man not busting through walls.
Through the wall. The Kool-Aid man going,
and smacking.
No, right? So Larry King, and then also Larry King hit on this one topic, which was the engine of the fighter plane that this guy flew. And he said they had to like stop the show because the guy wouldn't stop talking.
Struck a nerve.
Right. So everyone's got that one thing. And the same thing with exercise. I have one client, he hates exercise more than anyone I've ever met in my life. At his funeral, I am sworn to stand up and say, so-and-so hated exercise more than anyone I've ever known, and then leave the stage.
You swore to that?
I swore to that.
Nice.
That's what people know, that for the last 22 years he's been working out, he's hated every minute of it.
Wow.
But, how do we get him to stick with it? I found out this guy is perfectly built for lat pull downs. He's got these really long lats. Like, I'm talking like orangutan long lats.
Like my ceiling to my floor.
Right, with long arms.
Yeah.
But the thing is, he's also got a very heavy torso down. He's got very heavy legs. So he's never good at chin-ups because his body is basically lats and drag. Right? It's lats and dead weight.
Yeah.
Right? So he doesn't have like thin legs. He doesn't have really broad shoulders because he's got these long lats.
Right.
And when you put this guy in a lat pull down, even at like his mid-70s, he was lat pull downing like 120, 140 for reps. Which is
that's absurd.
Right, for a normal guy is a lot of weight. Not some guy they put on there, hey, look at this guy. He's 85 years old and he's boxing on a bag. He's also on growth hormone and 8 different steroids, right? So, and he's orange, right? Because of all the drugs that are in his system. Right, but he was built for that lift. And we're always wondering, back in the day, where his family in Italy? Were they woodcutters? Were they stonemasons? What was it about his body?
Made it develop
that
like
made
that.
It, right, well,
yeah.
So there's the idea of epigenetics. That's not what we're talking. We're talking about it's more selective. So, for example, the Russians used to take their ballerinas and x-ray their feet when they were kids.
Yeah.
And that's how they decide who would go to the next level of ballet based on the bone structure of your feet. It wasn't like the bone structure of the body. Right, jockeys don't start riding horses and wind up 4'9" and 105 pounds.
Right.
But people with that small structure get into that sport. LeBron James didn't wind up the massive human being he is.
Because he played basketball.
Right, he played basketball.
Yeah.
It's just self-selected for that sport, right?
Right.
So when you look at that, you start to see that certain people are built for, everyone's built for something, and whether that's in the gym or in some aspect of life, very few people go home and just stare at a wall all day. Something moves people. And part of my job is to try and figure out what moves them and show them how that relates to exercise. One of our trainers, Jeff Ezekov, he'll always say, we do what we do in here to make what we do out there better. Right? That's perfect. That is perfect non-gym rat mentality for the gym. Gym rats, the purpose of the gym is the gym. Powerlifters, the purpose of the gym is the gym, right? Their sport is the barbell. Right? Most athletes don't care about weight training because you have to teach them how lifting this barbell relates to them doing better at bouncing a basketball, throwing a football, taking somebody down.
It's deep.
Right. So everybody's got that. Everyone's got that certain thing they're good at physically. And everyone's got that one thing that they do outside the gym that doing the gym makes it better.
How do you find it if you don't know what it is?
Well, first off, after years, just by looking at people, you get a better idea, right? So you get a good idea. And look, I have a very simple system that I use. I do one exercise for front of the thigh, one exercise for back of the thigh, one exercise for chest, one for shoulders, one for biceps, one for triceps, one for back. That's 7, yeah. So somewhere along the lines, I'm going to look at someone move and see that they're better at certain things than others.
Yep.
But you can just look at someone, and if you see someone who's got broad shoulders, the odds are they're probably going to be really good at bench pressing. Whereas you see someone's got really narrow shoulders, maybe you want to do some work with dumbbells or push-ups because they may not necessarily excel at that lift in the beginning. Then when they've got buy-in, they might wind up doing that stuff. Right? So it's a lot of that's just being around people, talking to them. That's why whenever I train people, I'm sure you too, you interview them, you talk to them, you get to know something about them.
Absolutely.
You get to know what moves them, and you can just look at people. I mean, how many people have microphones and cameras around? So obviously something about you is about entertainment, right? It's about projecting yourself out in the world so people can enjoy who Jay Frio is.
Finding that one thing in my guests.
Right.
Yeah.
Right? Like I can walk in your house and I see a cross over there. Where'd the cross go? Was there a cross?
On the
there
right.
It is.
Yep.
There's a cross over there. So I know I'm in the house of a Christian, right?
That's right.
So I know anything
Roman Catholic.
Right. Okay, boom, right there. So anything I can relate to you on that is something, and then I can get an understanding, oh, well, you know, I go to the church and I love going to church and I want to be physically capable of being a part of the service for as long as possible. Okay, well, being more generally physically fit will help you do that, right? You'll be I always tell my Christian clients, you know, you're a steward of the planet is one thing, Christianity, right? So again, I'm telling this from a Jewish person's perspective, so correct me if I'm wrong. Well, you're also a steward of your body. You have a responsibility. You've been given this gift, like they say in
temple.
Yeah,
it's a temple,
right? And when you like to say in Genesis that human beings are meant to dominate the planet, it's not really translated as that. It doesn't mean suck out all the oil and kill all the spotted owls. It means you have a responsibility as well as a right.
That's right.
Right. And so I tell people that. So if I have a Christian client, I relate to that because they understand the word stewardship. They understand the idea of you've been given this great gift. You have a responsibility, whether you like it or not, to take care of it.
So you know the person, you know what makes them tick, and then you kind of tailor it to who they are.
Right. And that's why a great deal in the beginning when you would never guess it by listening to this that I listen to people as much as I talk. But
that's not the point of this podcast is not to have a guest on that listens.
Right,
to
that's true. Yeah. So, but you have to do a lot of listening to find out what makes people click, what motivates them, right? And then that's how you pick. Like I have certain clients that look, they're tennis players and they're golfers. Just picked up a guy who's a tennis player and a golfer. How much does a tennis racket weigh? Nowadays, they don't weigh anything. Even when I was a kid and they were made of wood.
A pound?
Right. How much does a golf club weigh?
Not
right.
much.
So how much maximal strength does he need in his routine? He needs to be stronger. He needs to build muscle. But he needs to do as much mobility work as he does strength training.
Right.
So for every strength training exercise, I throw a mobility exercise in there and I explain exactly how this mobility exercise is going to benefit what really matters to him, which is golf. He doesn't care about foam rolled, squeeze, core tighten, thoracic rotation. But if I can show him that club head will go an extra 2 to 4 inches further back because he can rotate from an extended upper back, and that golf is about physics, and 2 inches on the club head is worth 400 pounds on your bench press as far as how far that ball goes. All of a sudden, I've got someone who's going to listen to me now.
So it's almost like analogies.
Yeah, it's all about analogies and understanding where someone's coming from.
Parables, if we talk
biblical. That's fine. Right, but that's exactly that's why those stories last. Listen. Again, we're doing our thing here. People want to listen to us or not, it's fine. The reason why stories in the Bible have lasted so long, people say, oh, they're propaganda. Propaganda doesn't last that long, right? I mean, how much of what Chairman Mao said?
Not thousands of years.
Right. Who's even paying attention? Even the communists, for crying out loud, are capitalists now. No one's paying attention to him in that little dopey book and that goofy uniform they used to wear. These stories are powerful because we can relate to them, and we understand that human beings are human beings, right? So when you look at I remember when I was a kid and I remember reading, you would know David, right? King David.
Yeah.
All right. You read that book and you're like, this is God's chosen person. This guy's a hot mess. He had Uriah killed just so he could sleep with the guy's wife. And then has this son who winds up years later becoming the emperor, has 800 concubines and winds up having a son who winds up ruining the empire, right?
Did a lot of stuff.
Right. And so you read all this different stuff and you're like, how is this guy this is an embarrassment. But then you realize he's a human being. He's not a god, right? So so everything that he is, you are. So when I see clients or myself, when I have all these faults, and I get mad at myself at times, you gotta kind of back off and say, wait, what is this doing for me? Right? One of my clients is a Jehovah's Witness said to me, he goes, let me get this straight. So God said that David was okay, but you don't. So you got a problem with this. It's like, and he put it in perspective, right? Because he knows the book very, very well. It's what he reads all the time. And he's like, so God said this guy's good, but you got a problem with him. Like, you know what I mean?
Yeah,
maybe the problem is with you and not with the guy.
Right.
Because he's just...
You're judging David more than God judged David.
Give me that power and I'll have 50 Bathshebas coming into my house, right? There'll be Uriahs all over the floor.
Right.
And it's...
And the book of Mike, see?
Yeah. God help us all. But it's, you know, and it's like the same thing with when we study, like, for example, in Judaism. One of the stories that people don't realize, going back to our connection, you're Jesus. You know, David was Jesus' great-great-great-great-great-grandfather. Well, guess what? You know who's David's great-great-grandfather was a guy who slept with, he thought was a prostitute. So a lot of people don't know this, but the story of Judah and Tamar, right? So there's this guy, he has these 3 sons, and the one son dies of whatever reason. The other son refuses to get his brother's wife pregnant because then that means his kids get the inheritance. So he says, to heck with that, God strikes him down. And then Judah says, well, I'm not giving up my last son. So he basically leaves this woman with no one to take care of her for her life. She has no children. So what happens is she outsmarts him. She disguises herself as a prostitute, right? Sleeps with him, says, all right, give me your, I think it was your marker or whatever. I can't remember the exact thing. But give me 2 things that are identifying that these are yours, and I'll give them back to you.
Use it against him.
Right. And then what happens is she gets pregnant. They're about to stone her because that's the way they did things in the old school Bible, right?
Right.
And all of a sudden she goes, well, the father, these belong to him. And at that point, Judah was the first guy to throw Joseph in the hole. Right, it was all ready to kill him. I don't know if he was the one who was ready to kill him or sell him, but I think he was ready to kill him.
I think they wanted to do both.
Yeah. All of a sudden, he's the guy that David comes from, that Jesus comes from. So if that's where the lineage comes from, I always relate to my Christian clients that too. Like, look, you think that like you did all these things, your body's not that healthy, you're not. Look at the lineage of this. Look, everybody, you can do something. I'm a 46-year-old divorced personal trainer. My life is not over, right? So that's why I came. When you said, let's do the podcast, I'm like, yes, I want to talk to Jay Frio, right? I want to do this. I go out and do my YouTube channel. Are the graphics on it great? No. But there's a metaphor in that for your clients, and it's that you are where you are, start there.
By the way, Christian is in love with how you do things. How you just turn on a camera, unedited, and just go.
Yeah, Jeff makes it fun of that because I use the same. All right, here we go.
You have to have something.
Yeah, I'm blown away by the technology here. I'm in love with this. But it's just...
Oh, dude, you're going to be back on this, by the way.
Thank you. Yeah. We have to do these. We have to start somewhere. And I tell clients, you start where you're starting at, right? And if they're not a religious person, then I never go down that road because that turns them off.
Yep.
But I'll tell them, I said, hey, were you as great a vascular surgeon as you were when you first started medical school? Why did you go to school for 18 years? Well, because I wasn't a very good vascular surgeon. I had to go to school for 18 years. Right. So they even understand something they were gifted for, something they were built for. Took a long time to get really good at, but they saw improvement along the way. And so you always try to relate. That's just an example of someone who's in vascular surgery, right?
And I think Les Brown, the speaker, said,
he's great.
You don't have to be great to get started.
Yes.
But you got to get started to be great.
People should know his story, right? So Les Brown, when he was a kid, they wouldn't give him a job. He kept coming back, One day he says, I went back to the recording studio to see someone had died, right? And the guy's like, get me, and the guy told him, give me some coffee. He goes, get me some coffee. So now he's in the studio, not getting paid, but he's in that room, right?
Yeah.
And then the guy, Rock, I think was the name of the guy. He was the DJ.
Yeah, he was
and DJ he was an alcoholic.
Yeah.
And so he was getting drunk on the air and he was about to pass out. And he passes out. And so the guy goes, well, go do something. And then all of a sudden he's like, all right. And that was his opportunity. He was ready for it and he jumped on it.
That's right.
Now, Les Brown has not had massive success in other aspects of his life. He's been married multiple times.
Right.
He has a lot of kids. I think one of the stories he told about a kid he had that he never knew about.
He said God said, be fruitful, multiply, and he took him seriously.
He took it a little too seriously, right? So, and he tried to be a politician. That didn't work out long term. He had a show. That wasn't what the network wanted from him. But he found this one thing, and then when he speaks, he makes you feel fantastic he makes you feel fantastic enough to get up then and actually do something. But that's the difference. You're doing something. You see a lot of times these people, they're self-help addicts. You can get all pumped up on the drug of hope, but you got to actually do something. I tell my clients this all the time. I don't care what you know. I don't care what you say. I don't care what you believe. I care what you do. I had this one guy, great story. I call him the Ice Cream Ninja. This guy I trained years ago. And he knew every aspect. You got enough time?
Yeah, like a minute and a half.
He knew every aspect of every nutrient you possibly could imagine. But he was like 5 feet tall and weighed like 5'4" and weighed like 260 pounds. And what I found out later was He used to go to the ice cream place in town every night and get a banana split and a soft ice cream cone. And you say, why did he get both? Because he would eat the soft ice cream cone while they built the banana split. Right? So, and he legitimately knew that niacin was a vasodilator. Like, it was crazy the knowledge this guy had.
Wow.
But his ability to follow through on a calorie deficit was non-existent.
Right.
So again, I don't necessarily care what you know. I care what you do. And if you don't know that much, but you do a lot, right? You could have as a Christian, you could have a decent person who never read the Bible, but if they're, as a Christian would say, if you walk in the steps of Jesus, you're kind of getting it a lot better than a guy who shows up this church every Sunday. Because the one guy's potential, your actuality. And that's a big way, I guess, to tie it in. If you're not a religious person, guess what? You could have every book up on your shelf, but if you don't actually read them, the knowledge never gets inside your head. It's wonderful you have them in the house because the potential is always there.
Or you can read them.
Right, or you can read them.
But if you don't take the action,
yes,
it's just sitting there.
Yeah, and so you say, well, I'm not a very good reader. Okay, well, you're not reading out loud to anybody, so start there. That's the one thing I'd like to leave people with, is that a lot of times people have interviews with people like us and they want us to give them knowledge, but it's really kind of pointless because unless you follow through on that knowledge and do something with it, and if it's not specific to you and your motivations, like Devin said, you pull out that knife and that onion and I'm not making that dish, right? So you have to have something that that you follow through on, you know it, because if you're not aware of it, that's a little bit of a problem, and then you're able to follow through on it and it reflects who you are as a person, not what someone else thinks you should be.
Wow, man.
Yeah.
This was incredible.
Yeah, I want to come back and do this again.
Mike C., Cruickshank, the man. Cruickshank Redemption.
That's awesome. You'll
be back for sure, man.
Thank you.
Thank you for coming
on,
on,
Jeffrey,
dude.
give me a little love
man,
there.
Dude,
awesome.
For sure. Love all day.